Mark, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the podcast again. How you doing?
Hey, it's nice to be here, Adam. Good to see you too.
Yeah, it's been a while, and we always have great conversations and chats when we podcast. And we was talking about some previous topics before we got into this, and you mentioned like resilience training and the state of the world and society and mental health and how it's kind of snowballed over the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, even the Financial Times had an article out today, and they're talking about a mental health recession. I mean, the amount of people that are suffering, because of the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, interest rates going up, job losses, all these things are causing a lot of suffering for a lot of people. So the amount of people on prescription drugs is increasing. The amount of people seeking help in employee assistance programs is increasing. In fact, according to the Financial Times today, the employee assistance programs can't keep up with the amount of people requiring help, and that's just in the workplace. So you take it outside the workplace, it's a massive problem. So yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done, and linked to what we do in my world with the use of force world, it's something that's covered in as a separate topic. So when we talk about restraint, or we talk about teaching people self-defense, then that finishes, and then they'll go off and do another course on mental health first aid or whatever. But the two are interlinked, because if you consider what's called a universal human phobia, if I had 100 people in a room and I took a large snake in a room, and snakes are supposed to be one of the things that most people are scared of, if I threw that in the room, 15% of people would have a phobic reaction to that snake. 85% wouldn't, by the way. They'd enjoy it. They'd start pushing their mates towards it and videoing them and sticking it up on YouTube or whatever. But when it comes to dealing with interpersonal human aggression, so human being to human being, that results in 98% of people, according to the research done by Dave Grossman, 98% of people will suffer as a result of that. So it's far more endemic than snakes. And if you watch the news, you'll see, because of everything that's gone on and is going on, violence in the retail sector is on the increase, violence in healthcare is on the increase, violence everywhere is on the increase. So we're training people to go and deal with this by teaching them restraint skills and conflict management skills and everything else. But for me, the bit that's missing is the resilience, is building up that resilience within them. So once they've dealt with it, they don't then become a victim of the incident themselves.
Yeah, no, I think it's really true what you mentioned, and the fact that things have snowballed over time, and I think since COVID, things have just been like a pressure cooker for a lot of people. And like you said, a lot of people experience stress, a lot of people experiencing more anxiety and discomfort. And I think, as you said, this is across the board, more violence in the workplace, domestic things going on. And I've seen a lot of footage in America, especially. A lot of people, experience a lot of violence. I mean, there's a lot, America and the UK are very different, but I think across the board, it's everywhere, because there's a lot of violence. Things are picked up in London and elsewhere. Do you think it's because of like COVID and the impact with the current situation and cost of living? Do you think it's just kind of put into this soup almost?
Yeah, I think COVID had a big part to play in it, and I think the big thing with COVID, we're all in lockdown, so we can't go out. People's way of coping with stuff is to have some sort of external stimuli to be entertained. So they've got to have the TV on in the background. They've got to have something going on. I know some people that get up in the morning, they'll come downstairs, they'll get their laptop out, but they'll have the TV on in the background. But they're not watching the telly, but they've got to have that stimulation there. So people aren't used to actually being on their own. Whereas for myself and a lot of other people, and I came out during the pandemic and said, look, one of the things I do, which helps me immensely, is meditation. I do a lot of meditation and mindfulness. So instead of focusing on what's going on out there, I'm focusing on what's going on in here. So being able to do that is a very, very powerful thing. It's a very helpful thing, because you don't rely on external stimuli. So for example, when I get up in the morning and I come downstairs, first thing I do is I'll meditate for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, and I'll just internalize everything. And if I get stuck in traffic at a traffic jam, I won't freak about it, because there's no point. You can't do anything about it. I'll just breathe. I'll focus on my breathing and internalize. So, I came out and told people about the fact I meditated and during the pandemic, and hope to help them, and it did. It helped quite a lot of people. But some people thought I was barking mad, as if I came out and said I'm LGBT or gay or something. They went, what? And you're a use of force expert. What are you doing? Meditating with, do you sit under a tree with your legs crossed? No, it's not what I do at all. But when we look at the benefits of it, the evidence-based benefits, it's just mad not to do it. It's crazy.
I think that's one of the things that are really effective, isn't it? With meditation, mindfulness, and that area of things, a lot of people benefit a lot from it. And as you said, it's like one of the most effective things. And a lot of people, I think, are adjusting more to practicing it. I think especially in corporate environments and workplaces. Do you think that that's kind of merging more into that area, and it's coming out there more with mindfulness and the benefits of it? Because like we spoke earlier on the phone, and there's all these courses that you can take, and there's like mental health first aid and that kind of thing. And it's like people think this is like the only thing that works, or the main thing that works, and there's many other things that do work to help your mental health and to feel better.
Yeah, to go to the first part of your question, I think corporations now are getting more in tune with mindfulness and meditation. To what extent, I don't know, because I'm not involved with any corporates at the moment that I'm working with. But I think they're aware of it. But you mentioned mental health first aid, and lots of corporations have brought in mental health first aiders to help their staff. Now, the problem with mental health first aid, and this was reported by the health and safety executive, I think in April last year, 2021, is that they reviewed it, and there's no evidence whatsoever to show that it's working. Now, I've been contacted by a few companies, some of them very, very large companies, who've said to me, look, we've got a problem here. We brought in mental health first aid training, and our staff have gone on the training, and now they're starting to self-identify with some of the mental health issues that have been brought up in the training, and they're going to human resources and they're signing themselves off sick, and there's nothing we can do about it. So you've got, in some areas, companies working with less staff, more pressure on senior management to actually meet the output levels. So senior management are now suffering with stress. So we're getting this endemic cycle of burnout occurring, and burnout is huge now, post-pandemic. And I think it was sort of coming to a head during the pandemic, but this is part of the problem. So I'm sort of the antichrist of mental health first aid training. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm not saying in any way that I don't in one factor take mental health seriously. I really, really do, but if you look at, you can go back thousands of years. You can look at Buddhist scripture that goes back 2,500 years when they're talking about this. You can go back to ancient Upanishad scripture that goes back 4,000 years and bring it up to date with stuff that's being talked about now. And the simple thing they tell you is what you focus on, you retain. What you give your energy to, you help create. So if you're focusing on the negative all the time and you're worrying about your mental health, it's going to get worse. It's just, look at the research. There's nothing, that's wrong with that's untrue about that. So what I developed over the years was a course, I call it quantum thinking. Some people call it Mark's mind F word, for want of a better thing. And it's helping put the responsibility back on the individual. Because, see, this is another thing. When things are going wrong, lots of people go, it's not my fault. I need you to do that for me. I need someone else to do that. The cost of living crisis is not my fault. Lockdown, it wasn't my fault, and I'm stuck here and all the rest of it. But you control what you can control, and what you can't control, you don't worry about. So if I cracked a joke right now and that offended you, for example, or offended anyone watching this podcast, who's in control of that joke? Who's in control of the fact that someone's been offended? It's not me. I'm just the vessel that cracked a joke. So if say 100 people watch your podcast and 50% got offended and 50 didn't, then that means that they're thinking differently. So what happens to us in life happens. We've got no control over that sometimes, but what we have absolute control of, 100% control, is how we choose to respond to what's happening. And I think a lot of the stuff that's underpinning the increase in mental health, this increase, is that people have learned to react to stuff as opposed to stopping and thinking about it and responding to it. And if we can build that response, that gap, into their thinking by mindfulness, by meditation, by relaxation training, call it whatever you want, that can only do good.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, as you mentioned, people all think differently and we all react differently. And a lot of people react to something or a stimuli or a joke or a situation or something happening. They're in that reaction and they're not responding. And like you said, I think things happen very fast, life moves fast, and a lot of the time people might not be aware consciously in the moment of how they're reacting or why. And it's just like you said, like an automatic response, probably based on maybe things from the past or the way they view the world. But like you said, people are all thinking differently and we all react differently. But we should, as you said, break it down and slow things down and respond.
Yeah, you've got to build that gap, to give you time to think about your response. So everything we do is linked to a network in the brain. So every habit we have, so a musician, for example, that plays the piano has got a bigger neurological network in their brain than someone that doesn't play a piano. And what research has shown us is that all of our habits and behaviors are linked to neural networks in the brain. And the more you practice those habits and behaviors, the bigger those networks get. So if you think about the first time you learned to drive a car, it's not something you were born with, you had to learn it. So it gets a bit clunky with learning how to do it, and you get a little network in your brain. Now, probably when you drive a car, you don't think about it because you've done it so many times, you've practiced it, the network's got bigger and bigger and bigger. So you've heard the old saying that, practice makes perfect. It actually isn't true. Practice makes permanent, because you could drive a car and be the best driver in the world and you'd have a network in your brain associated with that. You could drive a car and be the worst car driver in the world, but if you practice that regularly, that'll become a permanent feature because it's linked to a neurology in your brain. And the other thing is we get addicted to our emotional states. So part of the brain called the hypothalamus will secrete chemicals, either nutrients or toxins, into our body. And we're a 3D dimensional model of about 50 trillion cells, each cell doing 6 trillion things a second. It's phenomenal. But those cells need they need chemicals to react. Now, for cells to communicate effectively with one another, they need nutrients. So if you have a positive thought, then a signal goes from your brain to the hypothalamus and says, right, produce some nutrients for these cells, and you get nice stuff. Cells can communicate. You have a negative thought, signal goes to the brain, hypothalamus produces a toxin, which goes to 50 trillion cells instantaneously. But that breaks down communication. So we become sick. We get disease, and disease means we're not at ease. So it's really important that we understand that we have to take control of how we choose to think and react and respond to that, as opposed to reacting to it. Because if we relinquish that control, then whatever happens to us, we're victim to. Viktor Frankl, who survived 3 concentration camps in the Second World War. His book Man's Search for Meaning, if you've never read it, read the book. It's a phenomenal thing. He could have been, as a Jewish person, he could have been pulled out of a line for no reason whatsoever and shot. And he while he was there, he was doing research, and he saw that you can have 300 of these prisoners of war living in a big barn with excrement and urine all over the floor, in terrible conditions. And they go out and work in the fields in wintertime with no shoes on and come back. So they had to have the will to live, to survive. And one of their pleasures was they would keep a cigarette butt. And when they finished their day's work, they'd smoke that cigarette butt. What Frankl noticed was if someone got up in the morning and smoked that cigarette butt, they were probably going to be dead before they went to work. They'd lost the will to live. So they had no control over their environment. They had no control over their circumstances. But Frankl decided that the one thing that he could have control over was how he chose to face death and how he chose to respond at any given moment in time to what was presented to him. And that got him through. And he came out of the war, and he set up a phenomenal therapy called logotherapy. And he was a hugely inspirational guy. And, you know, his work is worth looking at. But one of the things he would do, people would go to him and say, you know, I'm depressed, I'm not happy, I'm sad, you know, can you help me? And instead of saying, lay down on the couch and let's talk about your depression, because if you think about this, if you do something, a network begins. The more you do it, the bigger the network grows, yeah? If you close your eyes and think about it, because your brain doesn't know the difference between what you're really doing and what you're perceiving, the network will grow. So in therapy, if someone's depressed and they go lie on my couch, let's talk about depression, and they close their eyes and visualize why they're depressed, they're going to get more depressed because the network in their brain is going to grow. So the habit becomes more ingrained. So Frank will never work like that. He would say, you're depressed. Yeah, okay, here's what you got to do. You know, go to this home where people are dying, you know, they're terminally ill, and work there. And he would put it in, he would confront them with this reality, and they would go there. And, you know, there's, I mean, loads of things that he did. That's just one example. And they would, you know, all of a sudden the penny would drop and thinking, well, I'm depressed over stupid stuff, really. You know, this person's dying, you know, so put things into perspective.
Yeah, no, I think his work's really great, isn't it? And I've read, I think, like roughly half of that book. I still need to finish it, but so far from what I've read, it's really amazing. And like you said, he was responding and choosing to respond to what was going on, whereas the other people were giving up. And as you mentioned, we produce toxins, or the positive chemicals, either or, based on the way we think and choose to believe, the way things are. And a lot of people in today's life, in society, tend to, like you said, not be accountable for their situation. They react to what's going on and think negatively, and are reacting in a negative way, and don't think that things might not going to work, and it's fixing that mindset. But like you said, people tend to react and stress over things that aren't really that stressful. But then if they change their perspective by going to certain environments, situations, it can shift that perspective. Because I think that's something that people need, isn't it, really? And in my, in my work or in the past, you notice that in people sometimes, that they'll be kind of fixed in that place. And like you said, it's like on like a vinyl player, on a record, they're just in that groove where they just don't see any other way out.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And people don't like change. You know, we're creatures of habit, but people don't like change. But the fact is that everything changes. Nothing's going to stay the same. You know, the Buddhists talk about impermanence, the fact that, everything's going to change. And our bodies change. You know, these cells, these 50 trillion cells we're made up of, they're colliding and dividing and changing instantaneously. So we are in constant flux. And if we go down to the basic subatomic structure, the elementary particles that we're made from, because this body, your body as well, is made up of organs that are in turn made up of cells that are in turn made up of atoms that are made up of subatomic particles. And as we know, 99.999999% recurring of an atom is empty space. So you suck all the empty space out of every atom in this body, what's left of me is nothing bigger than the size of a grain of sand or a grain of salt. That's the physical reality. What we're seeing, projected-wise, is a delusion. The reality is we're energy. And in fact, if we did that to all nearly 8 billion people on the planet, you took all the empty space out of every atom out of every human being living right now, all you'd be left with would be a bulk of mass, some matter that would fit inside something the size of a tennis ball or an apple. But the emptiness is an emptiness, it's energy. And at the subatomic level, these elementary particles, these pop in and out of existence all the time. They live in a state of superposition. So they do not exist. So a particle is made up of non-particle elements because they just pop in and out of existence. So we're consistently changing. And, I read a lot these days. I read a lot of it, like from a Zen Buddhist master called Thich Nhat Hanh. He's been very influential in my sort of journey. And the root of suffering, according to Buddhism, is, is grasping. It's wanting to hold on to stuff because everything's going to change. It's like at the end of this year, I retire. I decided to take early retirement. And it's interesting because people ring me up and when you won't retire. I'm like, well, yeah, I've been preparing for this for 2 years. I've had 2 years of a pandemic to prepare for this mentally, and physically. Because most people, when they retire, they, like in many occupations, will die within a relatively short period of time because they haven't prepared to retire. So I've been focusing on this and meditating on this and thinking about this, and I'm good to go. But again, it's change, and I'm looking forward to the change. I don't know what's coming. So we have to live in the present moment. That's where all the miracles occur, being present. So the most important thing to me right now is talking to you. I'm not thinking about anything else, and if someone phones me up, the most important thing at that time is that conversation with that person. I just focus on that. My mind isn't going, I want a cup of tea, or, what am I doing later on? I've got these emails to answer. I just leave that, just focus on this. But a lot of people are living their lives, based on what's happened to them in the past, and then projecting that into the future. So, they've got a familiar past and a predictable future, and they're not in the present moment. So if you're not in the present moment, you're not alive. You're the walking dead. So people have to wake up and realize this stuff. There's nothing wrong with change. One day this body's going to go. I've got no issue with that. I've come to terms with that, because none of us are going to live forever. But is death the final staging post? I don't believe so, because if you look at the first law of thermodynamics, it says that energy can't be created, it can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. So if we're made up of 99.9999% energy, and that can't be destroyed, I'm going to transform it to something else, and that would have happened before I was born. Most people think they were born. That was when they actually came out of their mother and the umbilical cord was cut. That's their moment of birth. No. You were conceived 9 months before that. And if you want to think about this, further, you were conceived a long time before that, because you carry, you were in your parents and your grandparents, and that. So I'm a continuation of all of my ancestors. And when I change form or die, my children and grandchildren, there'll be a continuation of me. We all live on in different ways. So, that's one of the ways that I sort of view things.
Yeah, no, I feel very similar to that as well. And I feel, like you said, there is a continuation of life and energy, and things don't necessarily settle, do they? They're always moving and, vibrating and moving forward. And I think when you mention, 99.9% of, of what we are is always, moving forward and energy, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around that and say, well, that's it. I don't believe in that either. And I think, like you said, with life in general, and how our brains work and how people think, we ultimately have a choice, don't we, to take responsibility for that, and to over time try and change the way we think, to then change how we act. Because, like you said, it just becomes people's habits and routines, and that's what they become used to. So, like, trying to step out of that.
Yeah, and I've been fortunate enough recently to meet two people who've got absolutely nothing. They possess nothing apart from basically, in one case, the clothes on her back. And there's a guy walking around the UK at the moment called Chris. His story is amazing. He's an ex-paratrooper. He's raising money for SAFA. So guys, look him up. On Facebook, it's called Chris Walks the UK. And he had a mental health crisis and was looking at one stage, seriously considering ending his life. But he set off to walk the UK with £10 in his pocket. That's the only money he had, plus 2 days worth of food, which he put into his rucksack, and off he went. And he spent over 5 years now walking around the UK. And for the majority of that, he was on his own. He was living in the woods in Scotland during the first lockdown. He was then isolated on an island up in Orkney or Shetland or somewhere. But what struck him was the kindness of people, because he had nothing. And when he was depressed, he isolated himself and kept himself away from society. But when he started the walk and he journaled his walk on Facebook, people would meet him and buy him a coffee and give him a place to stay and give him food. And I watched a video, a BBC documentary about him. And when he was on the island, some islanders from another island or the mainland came ashore on a boat and brought him Christmas dinner. And he's since then he adopted a dog on his walk. He found a woman who was walking around the UK. They got together, they fell in love. They've now had a child together, and he hasn't got 2 pennies to rub together, but he's the happiest guy in the world. And he's an inspiration. And then recently I was in Portugal, teaching out there for 3 days, and I met a young lady out there, a German lady. She was on the course I was teaching, and she wanted to speak to me because I did a lot of stuff around how the mind works and quantum thinking. And she had a major crisis. She'd had a bad upbringing as a child. And she decided that, she got very sick as a result of working to live and all the rest of the things. So she gave everything away. She gave everything she owned away. And when I was chatting to her, I said, well, what do you actually own? And she said, well, what I'm wearing. She goes, what I'm wearing and what I've got in my pockets, that's what I own. Doesn't have a laptop, computer, nothing. And I said, are you happy? She said, oh, it's the happiest I've ever been. And if you think about life, and we're conditioned to this. Marketing conditions us to we need that to make us happy. We need to buy the adverts all the time. You've got to go out shopping. Shopping's retail therapy. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's retail suicide. You go out there and you become reliant. Well, if I'm feeling bad, I'll go and buy something. If I'm feeling low, I'll go and get a bottle of drink. And this is how people get addicted to drink. They get addicted to smoking. They get addicted to drugs. They get addicted to sex because they need that external thing all the time. And then what happens is the brain produces chemicals consistent with the high they're getting from doing whatever they're doing. And then when they don't get it, their cells crave the drug. So it's like they're coming off drugs, so they then have to go and repeat the pattern. And society educates us in this because that's how commercialism works. So we need to break that pattern, or teach people how to break that pattern. And the simplest way to do it is just to shut it out. Stop relying on the external and go internal. Because, we've got 400 billion neurons in our brain. That apparently is the same as the amount of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. You weren't given this, by accident. It allows you to do phenomenal stuff. When I get into meditation, when I go into my meditations, the feeling of relaxation, of joy, of bliss, it's unbelievable. And I can do that to me. I don't need anything else, and people should learn to do this stuff because it doesn't cost anything. That's the best bit. It's free, So going back to what I was saying earlier on about employee assistance programs, and particularly those people that can't get on there because there's a waiting list now, or people that aren't in employment, guys, go and learn to meditate. It's free. And here's the thing, it's the best thing in the world because it's the only thing you can fail at consistently and get better at, because you've got to breathe anyway. So if you learn to breathe properly, you're going to get better at it. Fail it 1,000 times, you'll still get better at it because you're practicing it. It's just a phenomenal thing.
I really believe what you said about meditation and going within, because I think, like you said, you can go on all these courses, or you can do all these things, or you can purchase certain items, because, like you said, we can condition to act and think and be a certain way, to buy this, to feel this. And like you said, it's just chemicals and these hormones that are being released through doing this set of activities, whether that's like gambling, drinking, sex, or whatever. People become reliant on that feeling and those hormones and become conditioned to it. Whereas you mentioned like meditation, if you're okay in yourself and you know what to do within yourself, you're not going to need those external things. And I think like people become reliant on these external things to make them feel a certain way. But like you said, through practicing meditation, that's the way forward, really, and getting to know how to breathe properly, your posture, and how to feel positive and well through doing that, and not having to rely on external things such as, the things we said. And also you mentioned like the people on the walk. I think, that's pretty inspirational, isn't it? With that guy going to Scotland, living in Scotland and being with himself. And, now he's met someone else, and, the kindness of other people. And I think, like you said, a lot of people can't sit with themselves or don't know how to be by themselves. So then they have to fill up that void or space through doing certain activities or having certain things. But then if you stop doing that, then you become probably sad or depressed. And then you need probably even more of that to kind of reach that buzz. And like you said, it's that self-awareness, isn't it? Of practicing meditation. And you said it's free as well. And also going back to what we said about like being in the moment, a lot of people, like you said, in a daydream, like The Walking Dead. Like I said, I'm in this chat with you and I'm focused on the present moment. And likewise, a lot of people might be in a chat and they're thinking about what they did yesterday or things from the past, or worrying about the future. And you're not really fully present, are you, if you're tied up to next week or what happened at work. I think a lot of people are kind of. Do you think people are caught up in that even more so because of social media, um, or the current situation?
Yeah, I think, yeah, they caught up in that because of social media. I mean, social media can be a great tool. I mean, I use it in our business. I use it for my own personal needs. Be a great tool, but the problem is most people are being used by social media and they're not using social media. And there's a big difference. People, there's a ping on their phone, they've got to get on there, they've got to see how many likes they've got, they put a post up there, they're worried about what people think. I mean, that's when it's using you. So you can use it, and people in business like myself need to use it and not let it use you. So yeah, it's people getting caught up in that. But there's always been this conditioning, because we live in a world of commercialism where you're told, oh, get this, it will make you happy. I mean, do you know what I hate? Bloody perfume ads and aftershave adverts, and they come around every Christmas because you see these gorgeous people up there and they're swirling around or riding on the back of a horse or climbing up a bloody lighthouse, and you think, well, it's not real. It's just not real. You wouldn't do that. Yeah, get some stuff, make yourself smell nice, but but people rush out and buy it because they're being influenced by these people who've got these phenomenal physiques that, great, but that's not what the average person looks like. But we're conditioned, because we need to be conditioned, because otherwise commerce wouldn't work. If you don't buy this car, then you're not as good as that person over there. So there's a lot of comparatives going on, and that makes us unhappy. At the end of the day, you'll be unhappy because you get addicted to it. So you buy the car and you're happy for a bit, and then you think, oh, a few weeks later, oh no, I need a better car. So you work hard, and you work hard to buy another car. And so the car has to get you to work, and then you've got to pay for the petrol to go in the car, and then the petrol prices go up and the cost of living goes up. So you're now stressed because you still got to go to work. So you're on a hamster wheel, and just taking a break from it. It just shutting yourself off. I mean, I go for a walk every day if I can, depending on the weather. And I walk in nature, and I'll do nice slow meditation walks and go deep inside. And this is the thing, people think that things like meditation or mindfulness is you're zoning out. It's the complete opposite. When you do this, you become seriously awake, and you become awake to everything that's going on. And it's the people that don't do it who are actually asleep. I can't remember who said it. It might be C.S. Lewis or Mark Twain. He said one day he woke up to find the whole world asleep. And it's a great saying, because you've only got to walk down the high street and you can see people walking down there looking at their mobile phones, or even if haven't got earphones in, they're walking along. And they're not there. Their mind is somewhere else. So bringing that mind back to that present moment is such a crucial thing to do, and to be able to train ourselves to do it, it's really, really important.
Yeah, most definitely. And I see that quite a lot, as you mentioned. I'll see it in the gym. People will be on their phone, they'll have their headphones in, and it's like they're somewhere else. I don't listen to any music. I'll just go and be in the moment and do what I've got to do. Whereas a lot of people, it's like they'll be on the phone for 10 minutes and then they'll be walking around. Like I said, it's like they're in a trance almost. If you're not as focused on the moment, depends on where you are. Like you see it a lot in cities. You're more like you do the training that you do. You're going to be more at risk if you've got your headphones in, or you're not really in the present moment. You could be more vulnerable to people robbing you, or being hit by a car or things like that. Do you kind of cover that in like training that you've done, like in people's awareness, or
Yeah, God,
have
yeah.
you noticed it?
Yeah, we cover all that on our sort of situational awareness training and personal safety training. Of course we do. But it's interesting you talk about the cities. I mean, I don't take jobs, and I haven't done for years, in a city. So if people say to me, Mark, we'd like you to come and do some training in London, I say, I'm not coming. I did a job this year for the British Transport Police, only because the guys were really, really lovely guys. And I said I'd do it for them. But it was just being there in that environment. I didn't enjoy it, even going for a walk. I couldn't find a decent park to go for a walk in. I had to drive miles to get into nature. So when we run our training courses, we've always known that the environment is as important as the training itself. So we train at the Lilleshall National Sports Centre. It's got beautiful grounds. It's a great atmosphere up there. And that helps because, you know, if you look at some of the research done by Bruce Siddle, stem cell research that he did, he got 3 cells that all came from one parent cell. So these 3 cells are the same. And he put them in 3 different Petri dishes. And he put different culture mediums in the Petri dish. So one had bone, one had muscle, I think, well, the other one had fat. So he put 3 identical cells in 3 separate Petri dishes. They duplicated themselves and they grew consistent with what the environment was. So the one in bone became bone, the one in muscle became muscle, and the one in fat became fat. And if Bruce Siddle's watching this, I apologize if I got your culture wrong. But it just shows us what the environment does, you know, to in basically one cell, that, and all 3 are exactly the same. So the environment that we expose ourselves to, because we're just a 3D body that's full of 50 trillion cells. And they are taken captive. They're inside this skin. They're inside our organs. So if we take this culture dish, if you like, and put it in an environment that's hostile, that causes us to think in a dysfunctional way, you know, we are affecting every cell, every subatomic particle in the way it behaves in our body. So we have to be responsible for that. And, you know, I mean, it's like I had, you know, it's no secret, I had a heart attack 4 years ago. And I, you know, went and did all the tests and everything else, and I was given various options, and they gave me a list of pills, which was like this. And I said, oh, no, I'm not taking them. The doctor went nuts, but I said, no. So I started to concentrate on my heart and started to meditate on the heart and started to breathe and then cut out things I didn't want to do. And I changed my diet. I stopped eating meat, chicken, fish, and dairy, went on a whole food plant-based diet. And I couldn't walk 200 yards without being out of breath when it happened. But within 3 days, after changing my diet, I was back to being able to walk 3 to 6 miles a day. And my last test, when they did all the thermal imaging and X-rays and MRI scans and blood tests and everything, I went back and the doctor was shocked because he said, you've got no scar tissue on your heart. And I said, well, am I supposed to have? And he said, yeah. He said, if you've had a heart attack, you will get scar tissue, remnants of scar tissue on your heart. He said, you haven't got any. And I said, that's a good thing then. He said, yeah. He said, but we can't figure it out. So I just explained what I did, and I told him about the diet and, you know, the meditation and except everything else. And he said, would I go and speak to patient groups about it? And I said, yeah, of course I would, you know what I mean? But I haven't been in, he hasn't arranged that yet. But I'm not alone. You know, I'm not a special case. You know, other people, a friend of mine got cancer, terminal cancer, given 4 or 6 months to live. He's a Christian lad, you know, John Davis, and he went to church, got them all to pray for him, and he focused on himself getting better. And it happened like that to him, totally cancer free. I mean, my camera's frozen now. I don't know if yours has. Yeah.
Your camera has frozen, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. I don't know. Yeah, but if they can still hear me, can you still hear me all right?
Yeah, I can still hear you,
Yeah. So he's now cancer free, and there's loads of people like this. You know, there's loads of people who have similar stories. So you know, health is wealth. So taking care of yourself is fundamentally important, because you can have all the money in the world, if you're not well, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you mentioned, you know, it's that, like you said, with wealth and money, you can have all that wealth and everything else, but then if you haven't got your health, then you can't do anything with, you know, if you haven't got your health working for you, you can't do anything. You have to have that balance with everything. And as you mentioned, you had a heart attack 4 years ago and you completely changed your diet and your way of life, and the doctors were baffled by it. And I think, like, a lot of doctors always happy to give people prescription drugs and things like that, because big pharma and how, you know, they make money and what they think works. It might work temporarily, but it's not the long-term thing, or probably the great thing that's going to help somebody. And you know, I'm glad that you're well and you've been able to turn things around. But I also had, like, a conversation with someone who their husband was put into ICU in America during lockdown. He had COVID, and they wanted to give him all these drugs. They gave him all these drugs, and he got really, really sick. And then his wife, my friend, researched different things, and she stopped him taking all these drugs, and he got better. So it just shows you, you know, through meditation, through looking after yourself and cutting things out your diet. Because I think a lot of things in people's diets aren't great for them. And I think, like, we're conditioned to think that certain things are good for us, which probably aren't good for us. And until you're in that situation,
I was speaking to Niles about this, having done the research into that. It's so true. But don't get me wrong, Western medicine is, it's needed. If people are all of a sudden seriously ill, got a disease, need an operation, then you need that intrusive medicine. So don't anyone listening to this think, hang on about a minute, I'm going to throw my meds out the window and just start, meditating. Mindfulness, those sort of practices, they will build the resilience, in your ability to not react and become more, take your time and respond. They're going to make you healthier as well, but that's a build-up process. This is something that you do ongoing. Whereas in any sort of medical intervention is there and then. If you fall off your bike and break your leg, you don't want someone to come out there and say, look, I'll do some meditation with you. You want to get rushed to hospital and get that thing put in plaster. So everything has its place. But if you look at society as a whole, we're the most technically advanced society in the world. But we've got more ailments, illnesses, sicknesses, and diseases than we've ever had before. We've got more people suffering with stress. We've got more, more weapons that can kill each other in more effective ways. So technology advancing in some ways is not a good thing. We become reliant on it in many ways. And again, being able to cut away from that and just be reliant on ourselves is so important. And that would be my message for anyone today: is think about doing this stuff. Think about meditating. Think about learning how to do mindfulness and go inside. I mean, I've been asked to run a course in the new year, although I'm retiring. That's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. So I said, we'll put something together. And I've just been introduced to a guy, Vic Vickery, who's a really interesting guy. So, go and have a look at Vic Vickery on LinkedIn. He's got an amazing story. He's doing great stuff with resilience training and stress training and things like that. Brilliant backstory. The guy's been to the North Pole, he's been to the South Pole, he's been to Everest. He's a phenomenal guy. And he's done this, with limitations as well. So I want to get people, relying on less, but using themselves more, if that makes sense, because you've got all the resources here. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I wish you all the best with that course when you do it. And I'll, anything that you're doing, I'll promote it as well and put it out there.
Thank you.
And I think that'd be great. And I think, like you said, it's important, as you mentioned, to focus on the things you can control rather than the things that you can't, and not be like reactive to things that are control, and to respond more in that way. But it's always great talking to you, Mark, and I wish you all the best in everything that you do. I love the work that you do, and I wish you all the best with your retirement and what you choose to do in that time. And I really appreciate your support, because I remember when I think it's probably my third podcast I ever did, and you gave me that encouragement to keep it going and that support, and you've been consistent with that, and I'm really grateful for that, because I think it gave me that push and drive forward to keep doing it and believe in it.
Well, you're most welcome. You're the future. People like you have to keep going, because if you don't keep going, it all stops. So yeah, keep on going.
Thanks, Mark. No, I
you're
definitely
doing great things, Adam. You're doing great things, and you're networking with some great people. And in fact, I've got someone that I'll put you in touch with, because he'll be a great podcast guest for you as well soon.
Yeah. No, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. But I wish you all the best, and I'll stay in touch.
All right, buddy. You take care.
Cheers, Mark. You too. Cheers, Mark.
Good talking to you.